Let's see if together we got the same answer for letter C. How many bottle caps he must have started with initially. If I knew that the adder was 5, that meant I knew how to go forwards week to week, but now I want to go backwards. If adding 5 tells me what he got in future weeks, I can subtract 5 to figure out what I got in past weeks. So 33 minus 5 would be 28. That must have been however much he had in week 2. If I subtract 5 again, that would be 23. That must be however many he had after 1 week. And so if I subtract 5 one more time, 23 minus 5 is 18. And sure enough, I think that's how many he started with initially. So the initial value should have hopefully have been 18. Now, let's make sure that we have an equation now that we have the important information. The arithmetic equation, and again I'll refer to my notes just so we have it, the arithmetic equation needs an initial value and an adder. We have those two things. So my structure is always T of n equals the initial value, which we said is 18, plus the adder, which we said is 5n. That should be my equation, 18 plus 5n. Now, there are a few ways that you can double check, but the easiest way for now is just use the answer key. Eventually, we'll talk about other ways that you can check your answers, but for now, I think the key is the simplest path. Now, in letter E, it says how many weeks will it take for him to save 113 bottle caps? This is where I want to try to think strategically. Remember in the previous lesson, we talked about the possibility of guessing and checking? Some people may have talked themselves into guess and check because they told themselves that was a good strategy. They're patient, they're good using a calculator, and they're good efficient guessers. Some people found that guessing and checking just does not work with them, and some people have never been good at guess and check for years now. So I don't want you to feel like you have to guess and check, because think about your table. We stopped at the 7th week and we're only at 53 bottle caps. So that means we'd have to extend the table even further to get all the way to 113. That might take a while. So knowing that I don't really necessarily want to extend the table very far personally, I'm thinking about other ways where guess and check might not be needed. If you want to try it with guess and check, I would suggest stop this video and just do it with guess and check. If you want to try another strategy, then work with me on this and see if this will help. What I want to do is just try to think strategically for a second about my table and my equation, because I know those now. Those I feel really solid about. In the table, I just want to quickly make sure that I remember here, the 3 and the 33, the 7 and the 53, those were given bits of information. 3 was how many weeks we had been saving, and 33 was how many caps we had. So the top row is always the number of weeks we've been saving, and the bottom row is how many caps we have that week. Now I want to think about that for a second with those variables that we always use in the table, that n and t of n. N is how many weeks we've been saving, and t of n is how many caps we have. Now I'm labeling that because I want to think about the fact that I just wrote this perfectly good equation. I know my equation is correct. And I don't really know that my table right now is helpful in problem letter E, because I have to go all the way to 113, and that table just doesn't go that far. Maybe the equation can help me with the 113. If I read it critically, I can see that 113 is a number of bottle caps, because that's what it says in the question, 113 bottle caps. So if I'm thinking about my equation, bottle caps is this part T of n. So maybe we can think about a substitution. If 113 refers to bottle caps and T of n refers to bottle caps, maybe I can just make a direct substitution. Maybe I can just use straight up algebra. Instead of T of n, I'll just substitute this green part here. Instead of T of n, I'll put 113. It's an even exchange, caps for caps. So I'm going to make that substitution knowing I'm totally allowed to do that. equals 18 plus 5. Now I don't know how many weeks it's going to take. In fact, that's what the question's asking. I have no idea what to put for weeks, so I'm just going to leave that as n, because I don't know. N is a variable, which is kind of our way of saying, hey, we don't know, so let's leave that. Is your algebra brain kicking in here? Because mine is kind of telling me that we can do this. Mine is kind of telling me we can solve this equation. If we want to get n by itself, what would we have to do in order to move the unwanted numbers? For example, I'd want to move this 18 because I don't want it, so I'll subtract 18 to the other side. Now, 113 minus 18, I'll just do a quick subtraction with my calculator. 113 minus 18 would be 95. So I'll have 95 equals, those cancel, 5n. And now if I divide by 5 to get n by itself, I can again do a quick calculation. 95 divided by 5 is 19. So that tells me a number for n. And if you're looking at that, telling yourself, well, I don't know what that means. Remember, n is a number of weeks. The question did say, how many weeks will it take? It looks like we might have solved for it. It looks like it might take 19 weeks for this to work. So instinctively, I didn't have to extend my table, but you can probably tell why it would have been so tedious to do that. I would have had to go all the way to the 19th week in order to get this answer of 113 caps. And that would have taken freaking forever. So the idea that we could make faster work of this by using the equation instead is certainly compelling, because that tells me I don't have to do quite as much guess and check. I don't have to do quite as much tedious work, and I can get these answers by using algebra instead. Now that you can think about using algebra in letter E, perhaps using algebra in letter F might also work. And ask you to think about question letter F. And without me just telling you how to do it, I want you to try it on your own for a second. How could you use this information from the equation, and how could you substitute something from letter F to create an algebra problem you can solve? Take some time to think about that, and then in the last video here, we'll talk about how I did it so that you can see if your thinking aligns.